This is Mrs. Clark, and welcome to my video on comparing data representations. So we have already learned how to make a dot plot, a histogram, and a box plot. Now we're going to talk about what are some of the uses for each of them, what are some of the things you can see when looking at them. This is going to go into your notebook on page 47. And you're going to fold it into this little book. So you'll notice it has two sides, histogram and box plot go on the inside, the dot plot and the title go on the outside, with this blank page to be where we're going to put our glue. So this data in this table shows a list of the number of minutes people could intensely focus on a task before needing a break. So someone could focus for 19 minutes, someone else could focus for 7 minutes, someone else could only focus for 1 minute on a task before needing a break. So this represents 50 people of different ages. So there's 50 numbers in this table. As you can see, they're not in order from least to greatest. They're all mixed up. But all of this data is represented on this dot plot down here. So that one person that lasted a minute before they needed a break is represented by this one dot right here. That means there's no other ones in the data set because there's only one dot here. But next to 2, I see 2 dots. There is 2 minutes here, and if I keep going, another 2 minutes there. So there's 2 dots. So we went through all this data and created this dot plot, every dot representing one of these. So there's 50 dots on this dot plot. So that's one of the benefits to using a dot plot, is you can see every little dot represents an individual data point for one of these numbers in the data set. So what it shows is the individual data values. Every dot represents a number. If I wanted to list out my data set, I could. I would put a 1, and then a 2, and another 2, then a 3, and a 3, and a 3, and a 3, and a 3, a 4, and a 5, and a 6, and a 6, and a 6. And then they would all be in order from least to greatest, rather than looking at this kind of mixed up data set. So a dot plot is nice because it shows us the individual values. Okay. Another thing that it shows us is the shape of the data. So we're going to be talking more about the shape of the data in the future, but in general what that means is where are the highs, where are the lows. So if you notice, the data kind of goes up and then down and then up again and then down and then up again and then down and then up again and then down. So we'll talk about if a graph has a particular shape and the names of the different types of shapes. But also you can look just in general, what are the highs and lows, how is it trending overall. So that can be seen from a dot plot if you're looking at the shape. The other thing that it can show you is the spread of the data. So there are different ways to measure spread. We're going to talk about that as well. But in general, what that means is how spread out is the data. So we can look at a variety of different things. You can see that on the dot plot, how spread out it is, just by looking at the dots and where they're concentrated. Dot plots are useful when the data set isn't too large. This one is 50. It might be too much to do anything more than 50. It might not show you a lot if you're making individual dots for more than a 50 data set. Like if you do it 100, it might not show you as much. Although it might also, but you're not going to want to make a dot plot if you have 100 values or 200 values. It's going to be very time consuming and probably not worth your while. So that's what this note means. So some observations that we can make, we can look at a couple things. We talked about it peaking up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. There's kind of 4 sections to this graph, and in each of those sections there's a peak or a maximum height where it gets to where there's the most dots. So we can make some observations that quite a few people are losing focus at different sections. So there are a bunch of people in this first little mountain losing focus here, which would be at 3 minutes. If I go to this next one, there's a bunch of people losing their focus in this area. That's the tallest set of dots there, which is at 7 minutes. If I go to this little one, there's a littler peak here, but that's like the peak of this next section, and that's at 11, 12, 13 minutes. And then this last section, there's a peak here, which is at 19 minutes. So those 4 areas are areas where there's a lot of people kind of clustered in one spot, the most clustered in that section at that one value. So 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 13 minutes, or 19 minutes are where we're noticing that quite a few people are losing focus. So that's 3, 7, 13, and 19 minutes are where quite a few people are losing focus. We can also notice where there isn't data. Nobody seems to be losing focus at what minutes? Well, if I look through the dots, starting at the lowest is 1. I've got dots on every number until I get to here. 11 and 12 have nothing. So no one seems to be losing focus at 11 and 12 minutes. Also, no one's losing focus at 15 minutes. And then after 20, there's nobody anyway. And below 1, there's nobody. So we can say at 11 and 12 and 15 minutes, people are losing focus. So nobody's losing focus at 11, 12, or 15 minutes. So we can look at trends in the data where there's still peaks and things that we notice happening. And we can also look at the lows and the valleys and see where there's not really a lot of data and make observations from that as well. Alright, so that's dot plots. Next we're going to look at histograms. So this histogram measures the same thing, the same data we saw on the dot plot, but it looks very different. So a histogram does not show us every individual dot like it did on the dot plot, every individual data value. It shows us different ranges. So we know that there are, between 0 and 5 minutes, there were 9 people that lost their focus. Between 0 and 5 minutes. Between 5 and 10 minutes, there were 18 people. Or actually, maybe 19 people. Between 10 and 15 minutes, there were about 7 people. Between 15 and 20 minutes, there were about 11 people. Between 20 and 25, there were about 4 people. So we have them kind of grouped. We saw different groups in the dot plot when we looked here. That there was like a grouping here, and a grouping here, and a grouping here, and a grouping here. So this is grouping them kind of that same way from 0 to 5, so just looking at those. And then from 5 to 10, so looking here. And then from 10 to 15, so looking here. And then from 15 to 20, looking here. So it's kind of separating it in different groups. And they even did a 20 to 25 group, where it only included basically these 4 at the 20, because there's nobody in the 21, 22, 23, and 24 minutes. So when looking at a histogram, it does show us more about the shape, like we could see in our dot plot. So we can still see that it's going up, and it's going down, and it's going up, and it's going down again. So there's still kind of these peaks and valleys. Not as many because it's grouped, they're grouped together differently here. I can also see the spread of the data. And we'll talk more about that as we learn more about shape and spread. But what happens is the individual data values get lost in the intervals. So now I don't see exactly what number of minutes we had the most between 0 and 5. I just know there's 9 people represented. When I'm looking at a dot plot, I can see that there's 1 at 1 minute, and 2 at 2 minutes, and 5 at 3 minutes, and 1 at 4 minutes. But together, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those all make up just this one bar, so I can't see, are there a lot of people in the low number, are a lot of people in the higher number, or more people in the middle? I can't tell that from this information. But I can make some observations. So I can say that most people here are losing focus in either this interval or in this interval. So between 5 and 10 minutes or between 15 and 20 minutes. So although I can't see the individual data values, I still can make some observations about the trends that we're seeing. The most people are losing them in this low area and then in this higher area of minutes. All right, then we have a box plot. So this box plot is made from the same data. It shows totally different things. So one thing that I can see from a box plot is the 5-number summary. What is that, might you ask? You might have forgotten. We did that on our box plot page, but let's look at what that is in this example. So there's 5 things that you can see on a box plot, because there's 5 things you need to calculate in order to make a box plot. Over here we'll see our minimum value, which in this case is 1. Over here we'll see our maximum value, which in this case is 20. So we'll know our lowest number of minutes and our highest number of minutes. That's 2 of the 5 things. Then this line that goes down the box is going to tell us our median, our middle number. So the middle number is 8. I go down to this number line. And then this part of the box tells me my Q1. And this end of the box over here tells me my Q3. So those are the 5-number summary: the min, the Q1, the median, the Q3, and the max. So I can see those 5 things. I can pull those 5 pieces of information off of the graph just by looking at the box plot. So in a box plot, these values, the 5-number summary, even though there's 5 numbers, it's basically splitting it into 4 sections. There's the section here between the min and the Q1. There's another little section between Q1 and median. There's another section from median to Q3. And there's another section from Q3 to max. So it splits it into 4 sections, each representing approximately 1/4 of the data. So of those 50 people, 12.5 is 1/4. So you can't have a half a person. So there's about 12 people represented from the minimum to the Q1, which is 6. So from 1 to 6 minutes, there's about 12 people there. There's also about 12 people from 6 to 8 minutes in this little section. So there are 12 people in that smaller range of 6 to 8 minutes. There's also about 12 people in the 8 to 17 part, which is this median to Q3. And there's another 12 people in the Q3 to the max, which is 17 to 20. So about 12 people fall in each of these little ranges, in that range, in that range, in that range, in that range. And so that's significant because we can see that we don't have the individual data values, but we know about how many fall in each place. So in a box plot, it's a little bit harder to see, but you can see the shape of the data. And we'll talk about what that means and how I can tell looking at a box plot. You also can see the spread of the data. And the way we focus on that in a box plot is we look at the range and we look at the IQR. Both things that we talked about when we talked about making box plots. So the range and the IQR both use the numbers in this 5-number summary. And we'll talk more about those as we continue on in our work with these kinds of graphs. So again, the individual data values cannot be seen here. We just know there's about 1/4 of them in that section, 1/4 of them there, 1/4 of them there, and 1/4 of them there. We can make some observations though. one of them we've already looked at here. We can tell the median. The median is 8 minutes. Because we know about the way that a box plot splits up the data, we can tell that there's a certain percentage of the data that falls in the short second quarter of the data between, so second quarter, the first quarter would be here, this would be the second quarter, this little spot, this little part of the box here. And because it's between Q1 and the median, there's going to be 25% of the data represented there. And that's going to be between 6 minutes and 8 minutes. So 12 people lost their focus between 6 and 8 minutes. We also can tell that 25% of the data is in this part of the box, between the median and the Q3. So it's a much larger part than this one. This was like skinny. It was only 2 minutes difference. This one is 8 all the way up to 17 minutes. So that's 9 minutes difference. But that's still 25% of the data. So 25% of the data is between 8 and 17 minutes. So there's a tight cluster of about 12 people in this 6 to 8 minutes. There's another 12 people in the 8 to 17 minutes, but it's a little bit more spread out. But either way, it's about 12 people in either section. And those are the benefits of looking at a box plot. So now we've compared what's good to see in a box plot, what's good to see in a histogram, and what is good to see in a dot plot. So go ahead and glue that in your notebook. Let me know if you have any questions.